we watched a video, I want to say 2 weeks ago or last week, I can't remember. And it had Adam Sues, and Adam Sues was on the ground of Calgary watching a protest that he called a climate protest, but it was actually a protest in solidarity with Wet'suwet'en. Now, those issues are related, obviously, because the Wet'suwet'en are objecting to a pipeline that's being put through their territory. But it's not just that they're reacting to the fact that climate change is bad and we shouldn't have a pipeline. They're reacting to the fact of like the RCMP invading their land, their territory, etc. Right? So it's the protest was in solidarity with that. It wasn't necessarily a climate change thing. That being said, this is the angle that they wanted to take. And in that clip as well, they addressed the whole David Suzuki thing. So for those who don't know, David Suzuki, famous Canadian, most known for his environmental talks. I want to
Nature
say
of things.
activism, but like he's done things.
No, the nature of things. The show
Yeah,
he was part of, but yeah.
When I went to Western, I lived next door to his mom on Broughdale Ave.
nice. I know that he debated Philippe J. Rushton, which is cool. Because Rushton is a complete racist asshole who's now dead. So that's nice. If you don't know who Philippe J. Rushton is, Muta, that's he was someone who worked at the University of Western, who it was a super racist, was the president of the Pioneer Fund, which is a race science journal, and almost got fired because he was asking his students for their penis sizes because he was doing research on IQ and how it
Jeez.
related to the size of their penis.
Wow.
Yep.
I'm kind of glad I don't know about the guy, and now I'm sad.
His work was extensively used by Charles Murray in The Bell Curve, which is another reason why that book is a racist book. I mean, let alone for
Among
the
other things.
yeah. I mean, but it's just the fact if you're going to use fucking research from the Pioneer Fund, not a good sign. But that dude is dead. So Philippe J. Rushton, burn in hell. Who the fuck cares about you? But so David Suzuki debated him at the time when he was alive, criticizing his work on the genetics of race and IQ. So cool Suzuki on that front. I've heard some things that Suzuki has done some other shit. I haven't like followed his career. The only thing I've criticized him before in the past is I disagree with a lot of his takes on genetically modified foods. I tend to be someone who's rather supportive of the technology. I don't think that there's any harmful health effects. I do have issues with, let's say, the more corporate end of things. Like I don't like Monsanto as a company. That doesn't mean that the technology itself is like there's other good technologies. Is what I'm trying to say. Something like golden rice or uh, crops. There was a genetically modified papaya that survived a disease that was spreading throughout the crops. So things like that are good technologies, and they're not harmful, and they're fine for you. Uh, but anyways, David Suzuki was like blanket against them for a while, and I remember criticizing him for that. But either way, he had a take. So that's who David Suzuki is. He's kind of like a well-known Canadian, and he had a take recently where he said that like David Suzuki, the eco-terrorist. Yes, his take was basically that if we don't do anything about the climate, inevitably what is going to happen is we're going to have people blowing up pipelines. Now, a lot of people on the right wing took what David Suzuki said and suggested that he was encouraging or at least suggesting that we should be blowing up pipelines, which is not like I think that would have been cooler if David Suzuki actually said that. But all he said was that like they're going to be inevitable if we don't do anything. And the right wing has completely lost their shit about that. So that's going to come up again here. But this is Adam Sues after attending that march is sitting down with David Menzies, and they're going to talk about the glaring hypocrisy of environmental extremists. Coolest thing he ever said, to be honest. Yeah, it was pretty cool. I mean, like it would have been cooler if it was like he was actually saying like we're gonna have to do more than just like march and shit like this. But no, instead it was like he was just actually stating what I take to be a fact. It's just a base fact that yes, this more more destructive acts of uh disobedience, civil disobedience and stuff like this are going to happen. It's inevitable. So here we go.
This is what we're
Oh,
coming
it's
to.
like
The next
two
stage after
times
this is
speed. That's not what we need. I
I mean, it
sometimes
would be
want.
helpful.
I know not everyone can process it. I listen to podcasts on like two times speed as well. It's how I get so much
Jody
knowledge.
acceleration this arc.
Yeah, no, I everything in my brain now is at super speed.
We're just going too slow for you, man.
Listen, there's a lot of knowledge in there I need to consume out in the world, and if I listen to it all at one time speed, I'll never be able to listen to it all. So it helps
Too
me out.
much garbage.
There we go. That's a
This
decent.
is what we're come to. The next stage after this is they're going to be pipelines blown up if our leaders don't pay attention to what's going on.
The next stage
Yeah, like
after
that.
this is they're
Oh
going
my
to
God,
be
like
pipelines blown
that
up.
second part of like if the leaders do nothing, that's the biggest like caveat, or not even caveat. It's like that's the if there's nothing done, like then this happens. It's like, oh my God, it's just basic logic. Oh my God.
Yeah, like it would be one thing if we said like I personally am going to strap a bomb to my chest and blow
Or
up
like
a
I
pipeline.
endorse it. Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's he's not endorsing, he's not making it, he's just stating that if X isn't done, Y it will happen.
Like if the liberal government does not do X, I will start sending schematics for bombs to like
Yeah.
my sleeper cell agents across the country who are ready to blow up the pipelines as we speak.
I'm gonna fund them all.
Although there's apparently an episode of The Nature of Things about urban myths about penises. The episode was called Fallacies. I've not been able to find it. I want to watch that. My God, that's amazing. That is amazing.
Our pipelines, Mr. Speaker, are the safest and most efficient way to export ethical Alberta oil all across the continent.
Ethical Alberta oil.
Oh my God, they always got pull that.
I don't think Ezra coined it, but he did write the book on ethical oil, which is why it's always like gross when I hear these people fucking say shit like that.
David Suzuki is so out of touch with the real world that he
Oh my
advocates,
God.
Mr. Speaker, for eco-terrorism towards Canadian people and
Oh my
industries.
God, this guy.
Advocates for eco-terrorism against people. Like
I know they're both public figures, but can Suzuki like sue this guy for that? Like that's defamation.
no, I
right
don't. I
there.
don't think you can. But what did? How did?
No.
And industries.
Against people and industries. I love like how those things are like
Canadian people and industries.
like what people like. So what? Tell me the environmental activists that are bombing people. Because as far as I'm concerned, like even ELF, who was the Environmental Liberation Front or whatever in America, they purposefully went out of their way when they enacted their acts of vandalism by setting forestry buildings on fire and stuff like this. They made sure no one died in those fires, right?
Yeah, like they went out of their way for that kind of stuff to not be like murderous. They were destructive, but not murderous as far
Yeah.
as most of their stuff goes.
But I love
I think
like
there
those.
was
Those are the two concerning parties: people and industry. Sorry, go on. I didn't mean to cut you
oh no, I was gonna say too, it's like he's probably of the or he's probably like appealing to the base that like thinks that corporations have a voice and like they're like kind of like the with the states
off.
with the freedom of speech is also money or something like that.
Well, I mean, this is a member of Jason Kenney's government, is it not? I think this is Alberta. Or no,
Yes, yeah,
yeah, because UC, so it's United
you
Conservative.
see, yeah, so yeah.
This
Like
is
what do
completely
they mean
unacceptable
by
and
ethical oil? Like
So-
how is oil any more or less ethical?
Yeah. So the argument in Ezra's book is that it was a defense of the tar sands, in particular because if we don't like destroy the Alberta environment by processing this bitumen in our soil, we will let the terrorists sell their oil to us, and they will then use it to fund 9/11s.
All right. I
Yeah,
stand corrected.
this tracks.
So
Cool.
our oil is more ethical. It's an Islamophobic take on the thing. You know, it doesn't make sense considering that, like, you know, no one seems to be against Saudi Arabia, either in the conservative or the liberal party, which is where a lot of the oil comes from. And yet they were the ones who were at least, I think most of the 9/11 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. I think that's the
Yeah, it
case.
was good chunk of them were Saudi nationals. Yeah.
So either like it's just an Islamophobic thing. It's kind of like the Unifor putting out an ad saying we should make cars here and how dare they ever get built in Mexico. Meanwhile, what we should be doing is having international solidarity, saying no, like the Mexican factory workers should also be unionized and paid better, you know. But instead, it's like we need Canadian oil because it's ethical. Because merely by the fact that Canada is super nice and polite and totally not committing a genocide against Indigenous people to build the pipelines to sell the oil, it is therefore more ethical to build it here and not over there, where the terrorists live.
Oh, I thought Ezra was also like on that whole free market and pro capitalism rah 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 thing. You think he'd be like, we could work with anyone else if we want to. We could buy and trade, like buy things as like at the cheaper price because that's a smart thing to do, right?
They've never been. I mean, they always feign free market stuff, but they're never free market.
Oh,
None
no,
of them are
definitely
ever
not.
free market. It's just they want to regulate things like racial categories and religions that they don't
Yay.
like. Yeah.
This is completely unacceptable and extremely reckless.
Adam, before we get into what David Suzuki was saying,
I have to acknowledge as well, we looked at the shirt sale that they
Shirts,
had,
yeah.
and he's wearing the Marty, whatever happens, don't go back to the future t-shirt.
Yeah,
That-
don't go back to 2020.
I think Elrond said only boomers will appreciate. And I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
Adam Suze is not a boomer, but he's a reppin'. He chose out of all the Rebel merch, this was the shirt he was going to go for.
No, that's a boomer. I see two boomers on Instagram.
Boomer is also a state of mind.
He's transgenerationalist. Yeah.
Yeah. Boomer mindset confirmed.
Yeah.
and the D word, despicable, that pretty much covers it off nicely, I think. I just want to touch upon the absolute hypocrisy of this man. In other words, here's someone that became very rich via taxpayer dollars thanks to all his CBC shows. He has multiple high-end homes. How does David Suzuki think he's going to heat those high-end homes if all those pipelines get blown to pieces? Does he have a special stash of, I don't know, dilithium crystals somewhere?
Ooh, Star Trek reference.
I hate that they still do the fucking meme over and over again. Oh ho ho! So you say you're for the environment, and yet you use things that harm the environment. Oh ho! Oh,
Gotcha.
You know, I have to imagine as well that David Suzuki probably has like solar panels. Probably.
I'd put money on that. Like he's got enough coin that
geothermal.
he like probably went for that.
Yeah, my guess is that that's happening. Like, of course, he's probably not like completely off the grid or like whatever. Or I don't know. I didn't do the research. I don't care because personally, I don't give a shit. I would just guess.
Individual's choices.
Yeah. Well, but like, I remember. This is actually. I wish there was like evidence that this happened. I think it's been scrubbed from the internet. But back. Oh God, it would have been 10, 11 years. I can't remember. Pretty sure it was a provincial election. I was living in Kitchener because I was attending the University of Waterloo. Hence, I'm wearing my sweater I had from those times. There was a provincial election, and one of the people who was in my riding was a conservative named Dave McDonald, and he was running for the Conservative Party, Progressive Conservatives. And there was a debate happening, and my buddy was like, "Do you want to go to the debate?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I want to go to the debate." He had to go, so my buddy was like pretty apolitical at the time, still is kind of, and he had to go because he was doing a degree in journalism or something. I can't remember what the degree was, so he had to cover this event, whatever. And I'm there just as keeping him company, but also, someone who has politics was not gonna just like sit there quietly or whatever. So Dave McDonald was doing his thing, and I heckled him throughout the debate. And at one point, he was like, "Oh, you come up to me after the debate, or and I'll debate you to prove that you're wrong or whatever." And so I was like, okay. And so I came up to him afterwards, and so this guy Dave McDonald, he used to be a weatherman. He was on like CTV, the like local version for Kitchener, and he was the weatherman for like years. But like then I get up there and he's like, "Yeah, global warming isn't real because there was some study in Norway that showed that it was just solar flares, and there's nothing we can do about it. It's just solar flares." And I was like, "Well, I can't even like fucking address that. Like you pick some random study from somewhere that contradicts everything else, and then you think that you're just gonna go with that study over there because it agrees with you or whatever." But then he was like, "The other thing is that David Suzuki and Al Gore are in a conspiracy together just to sell you energy efficient light bulbs." And
That's an amazing conspiracy.
That's props to that.
I thought just like saving money over time was gonna be the conspiracy, but no, it's all they need to invent global warming for that. I mean, hats off to them. That's good. That's a good backstory.
I
Fuck
can't.
efficiency. We just want to like make a thing happen.
I prodded him a bit, and he literally believed that like somehow David Suzuki and Al Gore sat in a room and like somehow plotted out that we're going to create global warming as a thing in order to get people so freaked out, and then we're going to, and like I don't even know if either Al Gore or David Suzuki are like somehow invested in energy efficient light bulbs or like connected in any way to that industry. But the idea was somehow they are, and therefore they made up global warming so that they could profit off of that idea.
Just light bulbs.
Energy efficient light bulbs.
Just light bulbs. That's the trick. Oh man.
I couldn't fucking believe it.
Yeah, Igloo, this is a good freeze frame.
Yeah.
Also, so going back on the t-shirt thing, I would have paid good money to see Suze be wearing the
Menzoid?
the Menzoid one.
I know Catherine, what's her face? Krausnowski. She was the one who got in a fight with Andrew Chapados that we covered last week, I think. I think she was wearing it in a picture I saw. But she also this like, say what you will about her and like hanging out with fascists and probably being a fascist herself. She went for Halloween as David Menzies. So I guess props for that. Here, let me see if I can. Terrible person, but I'm like, that's a joke. If you could poke fun of the person that you work with and dress up as them for Halloween, I'm and it was a pretty good. Here, let me I don't know if it'll show to you both.
Yeah.
But I'm like, this is a pretty good David Menzies.
Okay, that's pretty funny. Yeah, that's pretty spot on, I gotta say.
She looks a little too happy, like a little too like approachable though. That's the only thing I'd critique.
Yeah, well, yeah. He's got this face, but yeah. Same shit. Jesus.
Oh my
That's
god,
such a
green
good
screen.
costume.
Oh my god.
I'd do that if my friends knew who he was. I mean, that's the thing is like she gets to do it because my guess is she probably went to a Halloween event with other Rebel employees or something, because that's if you're working for Rebel, that's probably your only friend group at that point. So like you could do this and people would know. But yeah, for
I
me,
dressed up like that. People were like, "Who the hell is? What are you doing?"
yeah.
Are you Inspector Gadget?
I think there was a comment at one point that said that.
Yeah, that was me.
Well, I know you said it now. I
It's my
think that
same joke again. Damn it.
I liked it.
Oh, because you said Menzies looked like Inspector Gadget that one time. Okay.
Yeah, he's cosplaying Inspector Gadget. Yeah.
Do you think the Menzoid is the office punching bag? Yes. I think people make fun of the Menzies, and the Menzoid thinks that they're laughing with him when they're really laughing at him.
100%.
It's like that scene from Arrested Development when Job's like, "They're laughing with me, Michael. They're laughing with me." I feel like David Menzies is the Job of Rebel News. That's so sad.
Seems like it, yeah.
Also, they're like most prolific employee.
Yeah. I mean,
He's a go-getter at least.
you say it's sad, but let's remember this guy is a racist, Islamophobic, transphobic piece of shit. So, and very misogynistic as well. So at the end of the day, fuck him.
Yeah, let him talk some more so that we can lose the empathy, please.
Yeah, here you go.
It's absolutely staggering. It isn't just David Suzuki, it's virtually everyone. They'll take helicopter tours over the oil sands while criticizing them, be on mega yachts that consume
my
more
God.
energy in
I just like think about like in order to like capture what's happening there, to say spread the word about how terrible this is and use a visual medium which can help convince people, one helicopter flight is nothing compared to the sea of oil that they're fucking digging through.
And these guys don't care about helicopter flights or yachts or anything. Again, it's conservatives just gesturing at hypocrisy with no substantive critique.
Yeah. Oh, it's so embarrassing.
one boat trip than my house consumes in a year. The categorical hypocrisy. Listen, anyone who's espousing any values, to expect them to adhere to them perfectly, I think is unfair. But the extent to which they have such glaring hypocrisy.
So you just discounted your whole critique.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like about that.
I was hoping he would follow it up with something substantive, but it's just like he's like, I realize like not everyone can adhere to their values 100% because pragmatically life like it's difficult, etc., etc. However, when they do it, it's glaring.
Yeah, okay.
Like that's all you got? It's glaring. It's just when other people are hypocritical, it's just like it's dull hypocrisy. But when they do it, it's got some shine to it. There's a glare there.
Do we have to like make a tracker for like the rebels hypocrisy? Because holy shit, we'd be here all week.
Yeah. Yeah, but he's got it. But that's the difference. Their hypocrisy is dull. See, it's not glaring.
Oh, God.
Even on the local level, we were covering a protest here in Calgary just the other night. The video should be up at any moment. But they all drive up in relatively large vehicles, park right next to me in their gas-powered vehicles, and then they get out and they attend a protest against pipelines.
It was a protest in solidarity with the what's what.
Do they think those
Completely
vehicles run
different.
on hopes and dreams?
Adam,
Does he not know that there are more energy efficient cars and like other stuff? Like, no, I don't. Does like, do they honestly think? Like, I realize this is just hypocrisy, get you stuff. Like, they don't really care too much about this, obviously. But like, if we were to interrogate them, do you think deep down in their like brains, do they think that environmental activists or people who want to mitigate the release of certain emissions that cause global climate change, that like we're like against traveling at all? Are we using a vehicle? Like what's the difference between like reducing your usage or finding ways to make it more energy efficient?
Well, even let's play into their sort of like logic, like sort of like flipping the narrative on them. It's like, okay, you guys, like if you are wanting to be environmentally conscious or whatever, for like let's say talking to a rebel person, it's like, how about the lead acid batteries in your car? Do you want the lead in the environment? How about we get rid of the lead? Like just play their bullshit back at them, and it's like, yeah, they're going to be like, oh no, we can't have that.
Well, if they lived in a country where big lead was situated, they'd probably be in favor of keeping the lead in the batteries too.
Oh, definitely. But yeah.
I I do love it as well. He's highlighting like big cars or something like this. I remember seeing that video and he pointed out because he was like, look, they had to drive their cars to the protest. I'm pretty sure it was just a fucking like a normal car.
Like like a yeah, it was like I don't know, like a average SUV, like a smaller SUV
I don't even think it was an
vehicle,
SUV.
right?
I think it was just a car.
Maybe I'm just okay. Maybe I'm misremembering then.
Like
But
I'm
yeah,
trying
it
to
was like
like think of it. I'm not a car person. So like it was bigger than a Cobalt, uh, but like not as big as like a Lincoln.
oh yeah, it's not like a Suburban or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a car.
it was a car.
It's so true. As the saying goes, socialism isn't for the socialists. And speaking of
The S word.
Socialism isn't for the socialists.
Yeah, who's the socialist in this? Like, has anyone brought up socialism?
The
I know
socialists,
socialism doesn't mean no house, but
no, socialism means no pipeline. I think is there like anyone who's against a pipeline is clearly a socialist. I think that's what they're saying. But I don't even understand like the like what does it mean that socialism is not for the socialists. Does the only way I can sort of wrap my brain around this is like he's trying to make some sort of point that like a socialist society will be so dictatorial that it actually won't be for the people who want it because you're gonna put in a dictator or something that's gonna. I have no fucking clue.
Yeah, it's a little too confusing, I think.
Socialism is when you don't. No, socialism is when you do drive the car to the protest because you're a hypocrite. I don't understand. Like it's like they just have like buzzwords plugged into their brain. None of it makes any sense, and they just have to say it out loud. These people are driving station wagons that are literally plugged into the oil sands. Very interesting. Yes. If you're using any kind of technological developments from the last 200 years, you are no longer a socialist. There you have it.
Oh
You have
no.
it.
of which, certainly the UCP were outraged, and members made comments to that effect in the legislature. Where is the NDP in this hubbubaloo?
And part of the motion, it was a minister.
I do want to say, there is something about this discourse I find very weird, which is that across the country, not just in BC, like I can sort of understand this discourse in BC because obviously the BC NDP is in power. They are more directly doing nothing about the fact of what's happening to the Wet'suwet'en. So all that makes sense to me. And I'm not criticizing people who do offer criticisms of the NDP, obviously. It's just weird that the liberals have not been centered in this at all. Like it's not like like or any of the other parties. It's just always like those conservatives and those liberals like they just get left out of this thing and it's all the NDP's fault for the pipeline, or it's the NDP is being criticized by their own base because they're not doing enough to stop the pipeline when like the other parties absolutely do nothing to stop the pipeline. It's just a weird that like the discourse has been completely centered around the NDP. And here the ironic thing that we're going to get is they're going to be criticizing the NDP for not being pro pipeline, which they are, and for suggesting that the NDP is working with the Wet'suwet'en. They're not. Which tells me it's like it to filter back to criticizing the NDP. It's like if the right wing is gonna fucking accuse you of doing all the shit that like your base is fleeing your party for in the first place, why not just be the thing they already think you are? I do not fucking understand this at all. This is gonna be very frustrating. But generally, I think like it is weird that the discourse is totally centered around the NDP on this issue, when I think the bigger problems are both the liberals and the conservatives.
Yeah, put it this way too. It's like if the liberals were in power, they'd still be complaining about it. If the conservatives were in power, they'd still be complaining it's the liberals' fault. Like they're always going to point to their like opponents for whatever reason.
Yeah, but they're not even going to be complaining about the BC NDP. They're going to be complaining about the NDP generally and Alberta's NDP. Like,
Oh yeah.
let's listen.
Of Environment and Parks, Jason Nixon, who brought forward actually a motion calling for those comments to be condemned, for David Suzuki to apologize. But furthermore, he actually called on any sort of eco-terrorism to be condemned rather than applauded, because in fact, over the weekend, the NDP, at least a number of MLAs, endorsed the Wet'suwet'en protests, which have now been deemed illegal. For those who don't know, on some of these protests that
Yes, that is a fake. All their stuff is green screen, pretty much. Even David Menzies' set is green screen.
have been extremely contentious. Of the
No, he does not live in a swanky
elected
Brooklyn
councils in that area, First Nations or Indigenous councils, 5 of 6 voted in favor of this pipeline going forward.
Here we go.
The 6 that didn't
every
is not the group that's protesting these pipelines. Furthermore, 20 individual and independent Indigenous councils along the route of the Coastal GasLink pipeline, they also voted in favor of this. So this is not as though this is being done to the Indigenous community. In fact, the $6.6 billion pipeline is being done very much in cooperation with and serves as an economic boon for these communities. So the suggestion that these are being forced or thrust upon people is certainly not an accurate depiction. That being said, the NDP.
So we're gonna get the NDP here. So I can't remember if he made the claim here. Another claim he made was that like the majority of Indigenous people support this pipeline. Now he's basing this off the fact that these band councils voted in favor of it. Of course, not all, and like he also chose like random fucking band councils. Like there's another aspect which is like, if you have a band council that's all the way in Nova Scotia, of a different Indigenous community than the one that exists in BC that is opposing this pipeline, like there's an element in which, yes, they're all united against the colonialism in Canada, or the colonialism of Canada, right? So there's something that unites them. They still have different needs. Like they're not a monolith, right? So it's weird that we care about like what all these other communities think. That being said, it's not majority because a lot of Indigenous people do not agree with the band council system and do not participate in it because it was imposed on them through the Indian Act by the government of Canada in order to civilize them. Like the idea of having a band council was like, we can't work with the Indigenous communities and their weird forms of government that we don't understand. So we're going to force our government on them, in which the band councils have to report to us and like deal with us directly in that way. Where the hereditary chiefs were like, we don't want to do that. Right? So it's like, so you have interesting dynamics that exist within the Indigenous community. You have some Indigenous people that they don't dislike the band councils and think they're trying to do the best that they can, but they might not support them and might not even participate within them. So it's like for him to say that these elected band councils are somehow a representation of all Indigenous thought is just fucking weird and ahistorical, and also ignores the fact that, again, this was imposed on them. And it also ignores the legal aspects in which the Wet'suwet'en, they have claim to that land. They did not cede it over to the Canadian government. And I think that there's been other layers of the government that have conceded that point, including the Supreme Court, I think, at certain points of time. And of course, like that can be ignored at whim by our government because we're committing a genocide. What do you do? Sousa is a guy who for sure has the Saturday is for the boys poster in his house. Oh, God. What if I told you that Indigenous people from Australia support the pipeline? Yeah, exactly.
Indigenous people, they're people. They all have different opinions.
Yeah, but I mean, like, that's the thing, too, is like you have, like, there's differences within even like local. Like, I reflect on it, the fact of like, yeah, not every person in Ontario agrees. Like, there's conservatives, liberals, like Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
that's
diversity within fucking communities. But then it's like also it's like some of these things are not the same. Like there's a difference between uh he wants to ignore the hereditary system because it doesn't fit his narrative without even like explaining to his audience why that difference exists in the first place, right? It's just like because he mentioned something that it was deemed illegal, the pipeline was deemed illegal, so like we could just ignore what's happening basically. It's like yeah, but like for like where in the legal system does it apply? How does it apply? Is this injunction legal? How is it legal? Uh, there's like no criticism whatsoever. It's like for some people, for the people who've been complaining about the government this whole time and about how all these vaccine mandates are like extrajudicial and are against the charter, they seem perfectly okay to just ignore all the sort of like legal maneuvers that are happening against the Wet'suwet'en. You could just ignore it because they're just guilty and we can move on because we need to build the pipelines because if we don't get the oil, our penises become unerect and we need a full hard-ons for Alberta oil is what.
And for the flag.
Yeah.
And for the flag.
deep cuts or semi deep cuts.
Who is this guy who looks like a cross of Kenny and Ezra? He's Adam Suze. I don't know much about Adam other than I'm pretty sure he is a Christian conservative. And I know that because most of the coverage that he's done outside of this bullshit has been things like uh being against the at first I think he got on board with Rebel when there was that one church, the name is like slipping by me. What was like the main church that was protesting in Alberta that initially was blocked?
Oh, jeez.
Grace Life? I think it was Grace Life. He
I'm
was
blanking, sorry.
he started by covering Grace Life. Yeah. And then so then he somehow, because he was like at Grace Life, Rebel hired him. And most every story that he's done since then has had some tie into like Christianity. Either it was like building the helping to fund build churches on reservations was one of the things that he's done. And he does all like the church people who are being fined for their COVID stuff. He also interviewed a guy who was in support of gay conversion therapy, and Adam seemed supportive of gay conversion therapy as well. So,
Well, that didn't turn out so well for them recently in Canadian legislature.
that was right at the time. That was before it passed the first time. I don't know where it's at right now. I know the Liberals are planning to like put it through, right? But have they gone through the motions yet, or it's just on their
Well,
like
I
legislative
know
agenda, right?
Well, no, I think it totally passed in the House, but it has to go to the Senate and the Governor General.
Yeah, but because they called an election, that gets scrapped, so they have to bring it forward again and go through the motions again.
Well, I thought this just happened like a couple days ago.
Oh, if it happened a couple days ago, I'm completely out of the loop.
Mhm.
But if that happened, cool. Hooray. I'm a counterculture hero by supporting the worst parts of organized religion. The church building thing was like funny too, because like he had a segment where they were criticizing the church burnings that were happening, which were likely a reaction by people for these mass graves that were being found at the residential schools, and the fact that the Pope refused to apologize for it, and the church, even within Canada, refuses to apologize for it. So like there was some sort of reaction. It's possible that some people took to burning some churches. Now, he wasn't going to actually build those churches. He found another reserve where they had a church already on that reserve that was starting to become dilapidated and wanted to put money to it. And the interesting thing is, in all his coverage, he never reflected on the fact of like, why are the buildings on this reservation in a state of decay? And why is it that like you think that the church is the only building affected here? And so you're only going to fundraise to fix the church, and then what? Like the social infrastructure here is already fucked up because I don't know, maybe the government has imposed a system on these communities and fucks them over constantly, like the fact that they don't have water on a lot of these reservations. Like it's amazing to me, like why wouldn't he run some sort of fund to like get water put on the reservations, clean water? Instead, he fixes a fucking church and thinks that he's a hero. Like, and the thing is, of course, he centered himself in that whole coverage. It was like, look at me going out there and raising money so that we can rebuild this church, and so people can have hope in their lives. And that was the other part. Like, part of his connection was like the reason why this area is so like falling apart in his eyes was because they needed hope, and the only way to give hope is if you have religion there. So we're gonna help build this church. Cross marketing efforts between Rebel and Church, great, yeah. Probably a decent amount of crossover in those audiences. The funny thing is, I've noticed a change, especially since 2019, since I've been covering them, to becoming more overtly Christian supportive. And I'm not sure where that's coming from. Even Ezra, like his language towards religion was like more muted, even back in 2019. And like lately, he's been saying things like believing in miracles and how like, we need to say Merry Christmas, like just like weird stuff like this, which has a lot more of a. He even talked about like going up to the pearly gates when he's Jewish. Like I don't know if many Jews believe in like the pearly gates. Talking to Saint Peter, like I feel like, especially during the pandemic, Elron, in terms of demographics, I think it's twofold. I think the popularity of Jordan Peterson was the beginning of that shift. And then I think because the pandemic centered a lot of these Christian churches in Alberta that were being blocked from holding, or even the one in Aylmer, there was a lot of churches in our country that were prevented from holding their meetings. And they reacted to that. And because they reacted to that and started covering those things, I think their Christian viewership started to go up. And that's when they started appealing to it a lot more. And well, yes, totally to pander to Christian fascists. We even saw like there were some of their t-shirts that they were selling were like overtly religious, especially Christian religious. Hey, you're not suggesting that Easy Boy is a charlatan conman? Inconceivable. Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, he's clearly not Christian. It doesn't take long for Ezra to announce that he's Jewish, and I feel like he has to every time because he's so associated with neo-Nazis and white supremacists that he has to signify that, like, I can't be that. I'm Jewish. But now he's also kind of Christian because he supports.
It was really funny. It was really funny in that Lance prank call when he's like, "Oh, well, you haven't said anything bad about her Meghan McCain husband's religion, right?"
Oh, why is he Jewish? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and she's converted to Judaism, I think.
I still bring this up. One of my it's not my favorite memory of Ezra or story about Ezra. It's just in some ways the most shocking. Is in his book Shakedown, which is his fight against the human rights commissions. He has a whole chapter where he talks about all these people who have been silenced for their speech, and throughout it, he never mentions one, what they say or what they believe. And it gets to the end of it, and you find out like every single person mentioned there is a neo-Nazi. Okay, and not only were these people neo-Nazis, and the other thing is he has no citations in the book either. So he just mentions these things. Oh, there was this one person over here, and I had to like put together the various aspects of what he was saying to somehow figure out who he was talking about. And sometimes I could figure it out, sometimes I couldn't. But every time I figured it out, it was a neo-Nazi. And even one of them was this dude, Mark Lemire, who eventually he brought onto his show on Sun Media to somehow downplay the fact that he was the president of the Heritage Front, which was a white supremacist neo-Nazi organization within Canada. So he brought on the leader of a neo-Nazi group in Canada onto his show in order to say that the guy was not the leader when he in fact was the leader.
The grift is strong.
And yet he wants to claim that like he doesn't even know a neo-Nazi. He doesn't. I think.
Why are you guys? Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say the other funny fact about that is in the Heritage Front newspaper, which was produced as well by Mark Lemire, there was an article that they released making fun of the fact that Ezra was Jewish. So
Ah, jeez.
And that didn't stop. Ezra was still buddy buddy with them. There you go. It's yeah. They just Ezra sucks. What can I say? It was more of this. Casually having to fight against the Human Rights Commission. Yeah. Yeah.
The NDP has endorsed and supports, not all of them perhaps, but at least some, the folks who are illegally protesting and blockading this project moving forward. So
See,
the NDP,
it's
not only are they
NDP
not condemning
supports
it,
the West.
they're endorsing it. And the troubling thing is, as an
It's like I wish the NDP were the NDP that exists in Adam Souza's fucking brain here.
environmentalist, even if you are a militant environmentalist who is anti-pipeline, this makes your movement look bad. You shouldn't be advocating for this. Everyone across the board, from
Oh,
David
you should
Suzuki
talk
to
more.
the NDP, should be
Suze.
saying
The
this
movement
isn't
you're
the
part
way.
of.
But I love like we should, you know what we need to do is take our advice from Adam Suze about what our movement should or should not do, you know? Like that's like we should go to fascists for Christo fascists specifically to learn what we should do in opposing them, you know.
We'll fight this in court or we'll have peaceful protests.
You know, it's amazing, but not surprising. But then again, Adam, our beloved colleague Sheila Gunn Reid, she wrote that book a few years ago, The Destroyers, about the NDP's rule in Alberta. And certainly Rachel Notley wasn't going about with a band of guerrillas blowing up pipelines, but she was introducing legislation that basically carried out the same effect.
So see that?
What's the gorilla comment? Is that
I was like,
a reference to something, or
I don't know. I'm guessing that Notley doesn't like pipelines, even though she supported it. So, but he wants. I think he's just making a comment of like militants. That's what I gathered from that. I don't think it was like some sort of like racially tinged thing. Unless there's some specific person he has in mind that I'm not familiar with out of Alberta politics.
That's what I mean. Like, there must be some specific reference, or it's just such a strange word to say.
Yeah, it's not even an idiom or anything like that. It's like I could get where he's maybe coming from a metaphorical stance, but as far as like his context, it's like that doesn't look cool.
It could sometimes be an idiom for like militants, but like again, like listen to what he's saying here though, which is that he's saying that the NDP through legislation was metaphorically blowing up the pipelines, and so therefore they're just as bad as eco-terrorists.
Oh my god, dude, that's a stretch.
Right, Rachel Notley and the Che Guevara headshot. Well, I like. What did Rachel Notley do? Rachel Notley didn't do fuck all. I mean, it's the equivalent of fucking Oregon right now. Like the NDP premiers, especially who are in direct sight of these fucking pipelines, do fuck all about it. Which is like why I wish the NDP was the NDP that exists in his brain. You know, if what did Vienno always say? Like we need the armed militia wing of the NDP.
It reminds me so much of how like the Republican commentators, like if the Democratic Party was what they said it was, America would be in such a better place.
Yeah.
Or even like they'd be like more like in opposition, like they'd actually like throw the weight around more instead of like, oh no, we gotta appease everybody.
No, I mean like, and that's the thing is like, what makes me sad is like we already have the liberals. We don't need another liberal party. Like
yeah.
Anyways, we've spent enough time on this channel yelling about the NDP. I get to yell some more on Sunday when I'm at my local riding meeting. I mean, not yell. It'll be mostly supportive. We're just helping our local candidate get elected this coming June, but and he's good. But it's like I don't know. I'm so sick of the NDP to a large extent. But what else do I have? I don't have fucking anything else.
Yep.
There you go.
It's political party. They're people. They do stupid shit.
It's
time
just
to time or most of the time.
Yeah, it's just like in lieu of there not being anything else to participate in, what else do I got, right?
Yeah.
I can see them being on side. But interestingly enough, I believe there was an announcement from the David Suzuki Foundation that were saying, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't represent what we stand for. What's the deal there, Adam?
Yeah, well, I
Oh
know.
my
I
God.
think that there is going to be this apologist response, perhaps saying that, well, he was just saying that seems to be the direction it's heading. I would hope to God every organization or anyone with a sober second thought would be trying to retract that statement and issuing a correction or at least an apology to some extent. But I'm certain that the powers that be who fund this stuff globally don't
The powers
want
that
this sort of
be.
militarized action associated with them.
Oh my God.
Ultimately,
If
when
only we
push
had
comes to
half of the funding that he thinks we do. This goes. Oh my God.
You know, I have nothing. Like David Suzuki fucking apologized anyways, so it's like,
Being funded by those trillions made from windmills.
does anyone want to become a mod? Because it's hard for me to mod these and ban these like promoters. Usually our bot is supposed to ban them, but our bot doesn't seem to be banning these ones specifically. So I don't know if any of you want to become mod, or let's
Yeah, you can mod me if you want.
do that. Oh, hell is this? Da, 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 da. Mod Muta Supreme Mid, not mid, mod.
Supreme mod.
Oh my god. Let's try this. Does this work? Are you now the mod?
Yep.
Perfect. Remove them. Usually
Drop the hammer.
yeah, usually the spam ones like that should get like auto picked up by the bot, but I don't know why.
Oh wow, this is quite the dashboard.
I don't know. I barely look at it. It's usually Elrond or Vienna who do the most.
to shove on these issues when these pipelines get shut.
I was gonna say, I think the thing I missed while I was distracted by that was that I think Suzuki has I don't think Suzuki has apologized, but they're talking as if like Suzuki hasn't. And I feel like this would have been out after he apologized, because he apologized relatively quickly. And this is definitely after the march took place where they mentioned David Suzuki. And that was pre-apology. So I don't know.
Shut down. All that it means is we're bringing in more OPEC oil and we're bringing more international oil in. So there's no lack of funding.
What did I tell you? That's the ethical oil line. We're bringing in brown people oil, and that's bad. Fucking hate
there or efforts to ensure that our oil does not get around and that it's just international oil coming in. So the people who maybe are making these major donations to Suzuki Foundation and some of these other organizations, they certainly don't want to be associated with a militarized approach because they are so effective at working behind the scenes, working in the courts, and radicalizing folks.
Well, I mean, he's not wrong in that, of course, these foundations aren't going to want to be militarized. But I would say, like, maybe that's part of the, like, what have they done? Have they succeeded? Have any of these NGOs actually fucking succeeded here? Are we moving towards climate neutrality? Like, are we succeeding? Have things gotten better? Fun fact, Elizabeth May was making the same argument during the federal election. Yeah. About what specifically? Needing to blow up pipelines? Or the fact that NGOs aren't doing anything, or against militarization against the pipelines,
and in a way manipulating the media to garner sympathy. Ultimately, when we're looking at some of these protests, the majority of the indigenous community is in support of this. We have a small sort of
majority of the indigenous community.
Majority, yeah, it's citation needed.
I knew he said it at some point, like, and that's a bit of a stretch. Or it's like, if that's true, I tried looking up like statistics here and I couldn't find any. So like, I don't know how he could fucking reach that conclusion.
Well, it's kind of like what you even mentioned before too. It's like some of the bands that were like they're in favor of the pipelines, but like not going, like they gave alternate routes for the pipeline, right?
Yeah.
So it's like they'd be in favor of it, but the technical thing is, it's like they don't want it in the spot that the company wants it.
Now, like, yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like, I think they might just be against it now, full stop, because of all this bullshit. But like,
Oh yeah, I know.
the,
That's I wouldn't doubt that.
I mean, there's an element that it wouldn't. I mean, this is where it's like, I don't know that I would have like been cool with it even if it had like a moved plan. But like, I understand where the Wet'suwet'en are coming from, which is like you don't want it going underneath your river either, right?
Yeah. Like from like where like I guess not necessarily a policy, but like from where the issue is right now, it's like the biggest contention is it's going through a spot that the Wet'suwet'en don't want. And yeah, you could break down to the climate issue too, and a little bit down. But like as far as like what is the more pressing issue, I guess, if you want, like consider instead of like if you consider like climate change short term, but not that short term, I guess like it's
Yep.
the bigger issue. It's going through the territory that they don't want it to, just because of the water issue.
Which is why like they're two separate issues to a certain extent, even though again there is overlap. But it is funny that like they just kind of avoid the Wet'suwet'en thing and just say, "Oh, these are just illegal people, and we can just ignore all that." But let's talk about the climate hypocrisy. Let's refer to
It's
the
like,
Wet'suwet'en solidarity rally as really being a climate rally, when it's like, no, this is about the
no,
fact that they don't want a pipeline on their territory that they did not cede to the Canadian government, and maybe the Canadian government should stop forcing the pipeline through their territory.
Subsection of hereditary chiefs who claim that they are in fact entitled to the land, but they're not elected. They don't represent the majority.
oh my
It's
god.
it's a
these
complete
third-party
ignorance of what's
organizations
going
who
on.
are advocating
It,
against.
it, okay, it's sort of like another thought too. I've seen, yeah, sorry, and this is kind of like one of my pet peeves with these idiots. It's like they'll complain about like government officials that they're not elected. It's like yes and no. Like it's you get certain officials that you vote for, but you're not going to vote for like the health minister. You're not going to vote for like the
Yeah,
defense. Like all these like subcategories that go into the government, you don't necessarily vote for. It's like that's not how democracy, or at least that our form of democracy, works on that level. If you want to go and like vote for like the janitor division, like oh my, we're
but
gonna be
in
here all like forever for just minor things.
but even in this context, like it's really weird because think about what, if you just like take a step back and think about what he's saying here. He's saying that these hereditary chiefs were not democratically elected, and therefore they're not to be trusted, but these band councils are. When it's like, if you
Yeah,
take a step back and look at what the history is, the hereditary chief system is in place because, or let's say as a rejection of the Canadian system imposing itself on them on territories that were never ceded. So they were like, we it was like there was like a war, colonization took place, and we didn't completely clear them off, and they're like, we never signed an agreement saying this land is now yours as Canada, right? So then
oh yeah,
then rather than like finish it off militarily, we're just going, legally you have no rights here. Where it's like, put that in any other context and that would never fucking fly. You know what I mean? It was their land. We are still like, this is why, like I mentioned it in the last clip too, this is why the genocide is ongoing. It never stopped. It's not like we stopped and we're like, we've done enough. We've taken the land that we've taken, and here's your land. We're going to leave you alone. It's like, no, we just say that that land is ours and keep taking it when they have not given it to us nor left it. You know, I just noticed something. What is up with Rebel News Plus? Is it supposed to be like the new Coke?
oh gee.
I don't know what rebelnewsplus.com is. I think that just might be their subscription stuff. I think Rebel News Plus is like all the videos that you won't find on YouTube. It's like the additional stuff. So an example of that is I listen to the podcast, which doesn't have video. It's just the audio. And they post clips of that to YouTube. But I guess if you get Rebel News Plus, it gives you the full video of those. And probably people produce additional stuff. It's like the Patreon tier content. You know what I mean?
Alberta or Canadian energy are pretty quick to echo or at least magnify the voices of that very small minority when it benefits their interests.
When it benefits their interests, my God, I like. It doesn't necessarily benefit my interests. It benefits my interests in terms of being like against climate change, but it also like I have an interest in not continuing a genocide. I don't want that to continue. So maybe I guess that also aligns with my interests.
Such a radical position.
Hello, my rebels. Hello, my rebels. I'm a good boy. I'm a weirdo.